Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful and kindle in us the fire of your love. Amen. Well, for those of you who were here for our bishop's visit last week, you know what a glorious celebration we had. And one of his favorite songs is This Little Light of Mine, so we did that at the closing, and we did it with gusto. And I got a letter or an email from Newt Carpenter, the deacon that served with Bishop Lee last week, and he said he had really enjoyed our worship. You know, he says a lot of times us clergy types don't really feel like we've worshiped. But he really felt like he worshiped here last week. And he said the love in this community was palpable. You know, that you have among each other and for me. And I'll tell you, coming back from my dad's death, and it was just such a nice, soft place to land here last week. And it was joyous. And it was good. And so when I read, let your light shine before others, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. You are good at shining the light. And I'll tell you, God's light came through in so many ways for me. On my plane ride home, I had forgotten my gratitude journal at home. So all through the week, there had been blessings as we were saying goodbye to my dad. And I didn't want to forget them. And not having my gratitude journal with me, I just opened up my phone and my notes, and I started typing in everything I could remember about that week. And all the little graces. The social worker that bought food bowls for my dad's dog, and brought a blanket in so she could lay on the floor, because they let us have my dad's dog up there while he was dying. I mean, that. You know, when we got Coco up on the bed with him, she crawled up and gave him a kiss on the chin. You know, just blessing after blessing. And, you know, I just kept writing and writing and writing. And as they were announcing it was time to land, I was still writing blessings. 2.5 hours. I sat there counting the blessings of one of the saddest weeks of my life. You know, it's not easy to say goodbye to the people we love, and if we live long enough, we're all going to do it. But the light shone so brightly here last week, and it's that love and that light that sustains me, that sustains everyone. You know, we live in a world that, you know, how about it? Anybody a little depressed by the current state of affairs? As I looked at the week, you know, we had the mess in Washington, and some may be happier with the outcome than others. I was not really happy about what happened in Washington this past week. We had troops killed in Afghanistan. There was a news story that I saw that in the past dozen years, 60,000 U.S. veterans have died by suicide, which is more, by 2,000, more fatalities than we had over 20 years that we were in that war. From 1955 to 1975, there were 58,000 lives lost. In the last dozen years, we've lost 60,000 U.S. veterans to suicide. There is so much darkness in this world right now. It's tempting to preach in a way to call you all to action, like get out there and let your light shine. But the reality is, you might not be in a place where you've got a lot of light to shine. And I was appreciative in the Christian Century this week, Kat Vanicus, who is the rector down at St. Luke's in Evanston, wrote about these texts, and she said, I'm prone to preach the gospel text in a way that aims to empower the congregation to rise up and act. But this may oversimplify the reality of life. Sometimes the worst things that we can imagine actually do happen. And when they do, there are moments when we do indeed lose our saltiness and the light goes out. There are moments when we are in need of basic care, when we are not up to showing up, and certainly could not imagine leading the revolution. While Matthew's gospel almost never ceases to hunger and thirst for righteousness, sometimes we are hungry and thirst for righteousness. Sometimes we are hungry and thirsty just to get through the day. In these moments, we need one another to nurse us back to life, singing songs when we cannot make a sound on our own behalf. When preaching revolution, sometimes we must also make room for the totality of human experience. Sometimes we need to let rage and sadness enter into our lexicon and lectionary and to sit with those inevitable realities as well. It was a rough week for a lot of people. I think of all the family members that still have troops in Afghanistan or around the world. And I think of how many have to have their loved ones returned in a box instead of getting to hug them when they get off the plane. There's so much darkness in the world, and yet the light will overcome it. And if you don't feel like you have light right now, look around and get some from somebody else. Sometimes we can be reflecting Jesus' light, and it's just what somebody needs to see. And sometimes we're looking for it from someone else. And there's a quote that I like, a friend who is someone who knows the song in your heart and can sing it back to you when you've forgotten the words. I think that's something, I looked it up and it said Shania Twain said it, but I thought that's been a lot longer than her, but maybe she said it. Maybe she, one of many. They always say there's nothing original under the sun, right? But I love that concept that if we can't sing our own song, we can get the help of others. That's the beauty of community worship. That's how the choir can hold really long notes. One person breathes while the other sustains, and they just keep going. That's the Christian life. We sustain each other. We build each other up. We hold each other up, and we keep going. There was my friend Elizabeth. God love her. She's not preaching today, but she sent me a couple things yesterday. I'm like, oh man, you just gave me my sermon because I didn't have a clue. It's like I'm still in this kind of fog. Grief will do that to you. And so she sent me this writing, and this came from Marion Edelman, who's the founder and president emerita of the Children's Defense Fund, whose Leave No Child Behind mission is to ensure every child a healthy start. And she wrote this week, so many people feel so overwhelmed and disempowered by the stress of the current moment that they convince themselves they can't make a difference. So they don't even try. They bury their talents in the ground and let their spirits wither on the vine of life. I hope they will bestir themselves at least to say every day, as an anonymous old man did, I don't have the answers. Life is not easy, but my heart is in the right place. It is so important not to let ourselves off the hook or to become apathetic or cynical by telling ourselves that nothing works or makes a difference. Every day, light your small candle. Tutor or mentor or speak to or smile at that one child, your own or one you teach or serve in some way. Every month, decide to write a letter to the editor and to your representative about a need children have in your community. Every election, make time to vote for leaders who will put children first and against those who don't. The inaction and actions of many human beings over a long time contributed to the crisis our nation and children face. It is the action and struggle of many human beings over time that will solve them, with God's help. So every day, light your small candle. It just might be the one that sparks the movement to save our children and nation's future. Then she wrote, God, please help us to remember that all the darkness in the world cannot snuff out the light of one little candle. Help us to keep lighting our little candles until a mighty torch of justice sweeps our nation and the world. I had an experience when I was a kid. Before I started contacts, I had glasses. And I was very hard on glasses and drove my father crazy with how often I broke them. And I could tell lots of stories about that, but I'm going to tell one that's related. There was one night I was sledding. If any of you are familiar with Chicago, there's a Jensen Slides, and it's these big toboggan chutes. It's at the corner of Devon and Caldwell and Nagel, where they come together. And I was there sledding with my friends, and all of a sudden I noticed, things were kind of fuzzy on my one eye. And I took my glasses off, and sure enough, one of the lenses was missing. I'm like, I am a dead person, you guys. I just had this happen a couple months ago. My father will kill me. I said, we have to find this lens. So we're kitty corner across the street from a Walgreens. And we're like, well, let's go over there. We can buy a flashlight and see if we can find this thing. So we go over. But while we were there, one of my friends had the bright idea, like, well, why just get one flashlight? Let's get a box of birthday candles. And we can see if we can find it that way. And so we stood there in a circle. And I'm thinking, any cop that drives by is going to see all these little lights going around a circle, and we're all done for. But we lit up our candles and started crawling around on this hill. Wouldn't you know it, one of my friends suddenly was like, I got it. I got it. One tiny little birthday candle found my lens and saved me a whole pile of trouble. A lot of trouble. Don't ever think you don't have enough light to make a difference. This world needs your light. And if you're in a place right now where you don't have any, look around. There's enough light in this place to relight your candle till you're ready to go again. And sometimes when it's dark, it's like, how do we light our candles? We need to continue to nourish our relationship with God and with one another, and remind ourselves we're not in this by ourselves. Even Jesus didn't do life by himself. He called that ragtag band around him, and he had sinners and tax collectors and fishermen and other women and people that he just hung out with. He did not do life by himself, and neither should we. We are meant, this is not a solo sport. We are believers, part of a powerful community. Like I said, this last week was. It was an incredibly warm and soft place to land because of the light and the love in this place. There's a saying my friend Elizabeth often tells me, and this is by Edith Wharton. She says, there are two ways of spreading light: to be the candle or the mirror that reflects it. We have light that is available to us. Jesus is the light of the world. He lives in us. He lightens our life. And like I said, if you don't have it right now, reach out to somebody who can fan your flame glowing bright again. There was a story that I read once about a pastor that had visited someone who hadn't been in the church for a while. And the guy had a fire going in the fireplace. And the pastor stirred up the logs, and then he moved one of the logs aside until it burned out. The ember was not even glowing anymore. And the guy got the message. And he said, thanks for the sermon, Pastor. So he's trying to remind him, by yourself, you're just going to die out. You can't keep your flame burning. You know, if you build a good fire, it's all those coals together that make a bright light. We don't do this by ourselves, and we don't need to. And in the midst of all the darkness of this week, I went to one of my usual sources of information, Facebook. And there is a young man in, where is he? I want to say Ethiopia, but I could be wrong. Yeah, no, it's Ethiopia. Meet, Jonah Larson. He is an 11-year-old boy who, at the age 5, taught himself how to crochet. And he does all these beautiful works. It almost has me wanting to join the Relics in the Shaw ministry. Because he makes these incredible things. And he's got a website and a YouTube page and Instagram and Facebook. And he's got 200,000 followers. He raised $20,000 to build a library in the community where he was born for basic supply and school supplies for the children who live there. One little 11-year-old kid. Don't tell me you can't do anything. We don't have to do that. But we have to find out what our thing is and do it. Let our light so shine that people will know that there's a difference. That God is alive and well in this little corner of Elgin. And wherever we extend that love out into the world. And if the Relics help us do that, and you all help the Relics. But we all have people in our lives that do not have the light of Christ in their life. Be that to them. There are hurting and broken and sad and lonely people all over the world. And some of them maybe live in our house. May God use us all to reflect the light. May we all spend time each day thinking of all the blessings we have. I was stunned when that airplane ride ended. 2.5 hours went by like that. And all I had done was count my blessings. God is with us. The light overcomes the darkness every time. But how is God calling us to be light in this dark world? Amen.